You'll have to forgive me. I'm recovering from a migraine, so I want to keep this talk as short as possible. But I think it's necessary to talk about the fact that we all lapse on the spiritual pathway, and not necessarily in a state of fear or a state of stress or a state of agitation, but just a good old-fashioned lapse. I felt yesterday, and I don't want to be depressing because I don't actually feel depressed, but I felt yesterday like everything was just falling down on my head. I felt a bit like Chicken Little with the sky falling down on my head and the onset of a migraine. And as a soul, from a soul perspective, it felt like I was falling down into my body and identifying overly with the gross vibrations of my physical body. Now, I remember when I first opened the center, Japi and Sonali used to tease me. They used to tell me I need to go to the AA because I needed to get over my addiction to this spiritual life and the esoteric and the occult. I spent more fun times in an esoteric shop or at exclusive books, feeling up the books, literally feeling up the books in the mind, body, spirit section, or feeling up the crystals in a crystal shop than I did in any other so-called female-oriented shopping expedition or boutique. So they used to laugh at me, and I used to buy all of the cards, and I used to play with them, and I used to practice with my guides. And this whole esoteric life became something of a joke to the people in my personal life. And eventually I wrote a newsletter about having to go to the AA because of this addiction to the so-called esoteric life. And every now and again, when I lapse into being completely human, I notice how hard it is to be human, to do human. How hard it is to see the world from a positive perspective, from a faithful perspective, when my physical body is more present and my physical body is louder and my mind is louder than I, the soul. So I took it as a good reminder from my soul self of how extremely challenging it is to do human, and to what extent being spiritual provides a system of not just support and faith for my physical body, but also a system of wellness. Because the more I got into my physical body, the more in pain I was. And my migraine turned into a full-blown 2-day affair. I am very impatient with my physical body, and when it is unable to sustain itself and the needs of my spiritual body, and I am obliged to pay attention to it, I generally just hand it over and go into a space of healing by withdrawing from the world. But on this occasion, I found that difficult to do too. And I noticed how challenging it is to withdraw from the world when I am overly identifying with the gross physical vibrations and the thought vibrations of a human doing. And it became a spiral, because the more time I spent this doing human, the more impatient I got, the more irritated I got with myself for not being able to get past it, and the deeper I got into it. So eventually this doing human became a space in which I was digging myself into a deep, dark hole, and I had to keep reminding myself that first and foremost, I am spirit, first and foremost, I am soul, and in that deep, dark hole, it meant absolutely fuck all. Is that making sense for everybody? Because in that deep dark hole where the gross vibrations of my physical body were actually in charge, and my mind was spiraling into the world being too much with me. I mean, over and above all of the crazy stuff that happens on a daily basis around here. There was all of this stuff happening in the world, and Aretha Franklin was dying. I mean, this was enough for me to go into a deep, dark grief. And everything I was saying to myself, I could not believe it. My mind was not believing a word I said, and nothing I was thinking or saying or reminding myself of as soul made any difference whatsoever to me spiraling into a lower and lower vibration of myself. So I succumbed to my migraine, and I lay there in pain, and in my usual, when I am out of sorts with the universe mode, went, what the fuck, people? What just happened? And I realized how very blessed I am that usually when I hit a spiral like that, or I hit something, an obstacle inside of myself, I usually have sufficient reserves to stop, to breathe, to stabilize, and even to depend on spirit to get me through it. So I don't actually spiral downward so easily. But yours truly, in all of her great wisdom, had said on Tuesday night, if you were all at the chat or listened to it subsequently, that I choose not to depend on anything. And how easily and quickly I manifest myself and my thoughts and my intentions, my grand words of power in the universe. So Spirit left me to experience myself independently of all of this support, independently of everything but myself as a source of life. And I, the soul, discovered that I can't, that I actually can't do this or be this, can't maintain my vibrations, I can't heal myself without this constant support and infusion of energy and flow of the universe and the spirit realm. For a moment there, just for a moment, I could understand at a totally different level from when I was doing human consistently over 16 years ago, that feeling of living in tunnel vision and of not being able to quite see the light at the end of the tunnel. And when I finally emerged from that and the tunnel had dissipated, I decided that I owe most of my students a heartfelt apology if I have ever sounded like I take your tunnel too lightly, or if I have dismissed it too easily. I sincerely apologize, because when you are in that tunnel and life itself seems to be only the tunnel, it is exceptionally challenging to see much else. I was also very grateful that no matter how deep down into doing human I was spiraling, it would appear that even my very human vibrations are high enough for me to be able to rescue myself from a state of deep depression. But going there was such a blessing. It was almost cathartic. And other than the pain behind my eyes at the moment, which tells me I need to go and get my eyes checked and possibly upgrade my glasses at this point, or I need to stop reading my Kindle so much, good old-fashioned eye strain, I saw a few things in this in this space. It was very cathartic for me. One, not just how easy or how simple it is, how much easier it is to be lazy, to just slide into that fog or tunnel and stay there for a while, and then get accustomed to staying there and stay there forever. So I do actually feel like I can understand Robin Williams now. I can understand that purporting and pretending on the outside and demonstrating for others that I'm so okay, and then underneath that, being in a space where you actually cannot explain what you're feeling or what you're saying or what you know inside, and where the thoughts or the personal frequencies are so damningly low that any thought of rescuing self must be difficult. So that was the one thing. The other thing I realized while I was there was what an imperative it is for me, particularly because I want to live as soul first and foremost, what an imperative it is to remain in a certain frequency of flow, to stabilize, to stay consistently and constantly in a particular frequency with the whole universe. And that those frequencies must be maintained by maintaining my physical body, as well as my emotional body and my mental body, and not just, as I usually do, my spiritual body. That occasionally I am required to turn my thinking topsy-turvy and start with the gross physical plane as opposed to coming predominantly from the spiritual plane. And then, of course, when I cancelled my session with Ramona, she said, "Oh, stressed. Sorry, we're not allowed to be stressed." And it pointed something else out for me, that the spiritual life is generally a de-stressed life. Mainly because whatever's going on feels more manageable, and I tend to take it all in my stride. And I think of stressed as just desserts. I think of it as something that I have imposed on myself, and when it does happen, I manage it. I don't get all stressed and anxious and panic-stricken and go into different scenarios. I get fighting about it, and so I revitalize my energy system by bringing forth my spiritual warrior and desire for justice, blah, blah, blah. But this doesn't mean that there isn't a level of agitation that must be acknowledged. In my impatience, I usually don't acknowledge the agitation, and I just leave it there to do whatever it's doing, and at some point it must catch up with me. So I learned my lesson about not just breathing in and moving forward in my usual confident way, but actually going to that kernel of agitation and unwrapping it and pinpointing it, or putting a little pin in it so that it can be diffused. I decided at some point in this whole pay attention to why I was in pain scenario that I needed to do acupuncture on my mental body and my emotional body on a regular basis, just to empty out all the energy that I so obliviously take on. And some of that is grief. I had an overwhelming sense of grief yesterday with Aretha Franklin, but all of it wasn't about Aretha Franklin. It was about a range of things. And when I stop to look at that range, I can find a spectrum. I can find that some of it is personal, and some of it is community-based, and most of it is just universal. And like most people, I work very hard at holding it at bay, and holding it at bay takes its toll. So of course, everything comes together at some point. But it all becomes overwhelming and less manageable when I over-identify with the gross physical plane vibrations of my body. When I become more in my body than I am soul. So here, in my physical body, when I got to that point where I had to do something for myself, because nobody, and I mean nobody, they're just laughing at me. They were laughing at me yesterday as well, was doing anything about it. I actually had to take stock of who I am. I didn't count my blessings, I just stopped and I asked myself, can I do this alone? I remember 2 years ago I asked the same question about, can I walk alone after Paddy died? And I've been learning ever since to walk alone. And yesterday I realized I can. I cannot walk alone in an entire universal flow without spirit, because so much of who I am, so much of my work and my being present and purposeful is dependent on the universal flow and the support of spirit. But as an individual who is not seeking to serve the whole of humanity and the mass consciousness, can I walk alone, independently of my physical body vibrations, in my physical body, and working with myself every step of the way? And can I rescue myself? And the quick answer was yes. So I rescued myself by focusing in on all of the techniques I had ever learned, all of the techniques I teach, and consciously, step by step, balancing my chakras, balancing my bodies. Man, it was hard work. So for all of you who do these meditations on a regular basis and who work at bringing your bodies into balance and getting grounded and breathing, I understand now how much harder it is when you are working from a physical body perspective as opposed to a soul self perspective. Because usually I would lie quietly, set a clear intention, and of course in harmony with my soul self and spirit, the work gets done almost instantaneously. But this was a challenge, and it took a while for me to bring myself into a space where firstly I was no longer spiraling, and secondly I was beginning to stabilize and feeling like I had rescued myself. What made it all the more difficult was the knowing, and I'm sure all of you have this, was the knowing that spirit is there somewhere, but I couldn't access them and I couldn't use them. And no matter how much I was going, guys, can we just sort this out? Hello, where is everybody? I wasn't getting a response. I had the awareness that they were there somewhere, but I wasn't getting a response, and I wasn't getting the feeling of them working with me. So for everybody who doesn't tune in as instantaneously or doesn't get the message as clearly and as directly, I see now how challenging it is, and how I actually just take, my God, I take so much of this very practical relationship with spirit for granted. My guides have taught me a really good lesson about the value of my relationship with them and their relationship with me, even as I am learning to value the relationship between teacher and student at a completely different space in my life. This sliding down and lapsing so grandly, really, there's no doing anything in half measures here. It had to go from one extreme to the other. Also went hand in hand with the lunar eclipse that we had this weekend. It was a lunar eclipse in the new moon. 2018 has been designated a year of clearing. So in complete use of that energy, I spiraled into a space where I really needed to clean out any old residual stuff, especially grief, that was sitting there in order to liberate the love that grief comes from. In addition to that, we've been doing the solar plexus work in our Tuesday group. And every time we do a clearing of the solar plexus, I feel as if it goes deeper and deeper and deeper into all of my unconscious and subconscious self, as well as my semi-conscious, conscious self, and clears away things of which I have no notion. And usually I bounce back easily, but this time Spirit left me to do it myself, so I'm bouncing back very slowly. But all of this work had the capacity to bring me to my knees in terms of lapsing. And so again, I acknowledge for all of you who are struggling with these meditations to work with them and to hold that energy and even to rise to the occasion with each of them. My deepest apologies. I really did not expect that they would be so, give me a word, demanding, devastating, or even demoralizing, because I see that they might actually have that effect on somebody who is not entirely in harmony with the work. So I'm not going to downstep the vibration of the work, because really that must be a vibration that uplifts the mass consciousness. But I am going to go easier on all of us.
We've heard that before.
Skepticism meets me where I sit, in the face of God. Now, I think we need to just ease up a little here, because it was such a wake-up call for me that twice a week we come here and we do this high vibrational work, and my physical body got to a space where it was saying enough, just enough. And I always just, laugh it off, because I live in that zone all the time. And I think it's because I live in that zone all the time. But when I was talking to Oliver and talking to Ramona and talking to Shahina and talking to other clients, I get that there is this general overall flow of clearing out that's happening, and that really we're in a space where we need to be a lot kinder to ourselves. I am being kind to myself at the moment by feeding myself properly and giving myself restful, creative things to do, like reading, instead of trying to work hard and be present and be available to others and be purposeful for others. I'm just being purposeful for myself at the moment. And I suggest you don't take my apology so seriously that you think I am no longer going to be demanding. I am apologizing only for any level of ignorance or not seeing it from your perspective. I'm not apologizing for the level of the work or the quality of the work. Have I now clarified that? Thank you.
So nothing's going to change.
No, we're going to ease up a little. We have to ease up a little. All this clearing that we've been doing on the solar plexus, while bringing ourselves in this group into harmony with Spirit, needs some relaxing. We try. In any event, this catharsis has been really good for me. I have learned a good few lessons in it. But I think what I really want to say to everybody is these lapses, this going into myself and fighting with myself or fighting with Spirit, they happen fairly often. You'll hear them in the meditation chats. And when they happen to you, allow them. There is nothing wrong. Really, there is no judgment to be made about lapsing into yourself and going into a space where you are completely and utterly doing human. It becomes a problem only when in that space of lapsing into your doing human, you come from ego and lash out at others. It becomes a problem only if you go into that space and in that tunnel vision you become toxic, more toxic to yourself and others from an ego defense mechanism. If you lapse, there is an opportunity to practice forgiving yourself. Everybody has heard the phrase, before enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. After enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. All the practical day-to-day realities must continue. And if I have not impressed upon you before how very vital this peace of mind, this support structure called the universe and spirit, how very vital this spiritual life is to maintaining some level of harmony and confidence and assurance in managing the practical details of my life truly is for me, then let this experience impress that upon you. If I have taken it for granted to this point in time, this experience has made it perfectly clear for me how very dependent I am on the universal flow to be a miracle maker and a magical manifester and to enjoy the abundance of my doing human. Because without that universal flow, even the abundance of doing human felt pretty much like poverty. I looked at the space that I live in yesterday in this tunnel vision fog, and all I could see was the burden of it. It was very difficult actually to see the abundance of my life when I am living in that gross physical vibration. It was very easy to see all the problems with the world and come up with a litany of complaints and forget how very loved and blessed I am. So I am much lighter today, despite the pain behind my eyes, because not only am I acknowledging the value of masters in my life, or the value of myself as a master of my life, but I am acknowledging with great gratitude the value of my physical body in holding this space for me, and I have made a new commitment to ensuring that it grows old as disgracefully as possible. I think this is like the third time I'm having to do this. Hopefully I will not be lapsing on this commitment again. And if I'm demonstrating for you how very easy it is for everybody to forget their commitments to themselves and lapse into the doing nothing and procrastinating and being lazy, well, let me demonstrate it well. At least I'm doing that well. Yeah. If there was any pedestal that you had put me on in your mind, have I toppled right off it now? My teachers laugh at me when I fight with them, especially Shirdi Baba. He laughs at me because he says, why do you fight with spirit? Why do you get out of sorts with us? When in fact you are fighting with yourself and you are out of sorts with yourself. So I fight with them and I say, but you're my helpers. You're supposed to be supportive. You're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that. And of course they laugh at me and say, where did you get all these rules from? We're not supposed to do anything. I, the soul, is nowhere near entitled. This is just your ego talking. Shut up. Be quiet. Get restful. Meditate. And most often than not, they sound exactly like me when I'm talking to all of you. So I understood. I had a bit of a giggle. So today we're going to be kind. We're going to be restful. We're going to do nothing. How does nothing sound? No, don't nod at me, because the one thing this group struggles with is doing nothing and resting and relaxing. You all dart all over the place and get more agitated when I say let's do nothing. Isn't that so? We've done this before, where we've tried to do nothing. So I have asked the Lord husband, I really do need to sort out my eyesight and my inner sight today. So I've asked the Lord husband to house us all in his third eye so that we can relax there. So let's take a deep breath in and meditate.